Welcome back to the Spoonie and Caregiver Live podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Banderas. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes of the podcast. And let's go ahead and get into today's episode, shall we? All right, so let's go ahead and get into today's episode. And one of the things that I want to start with is, or I want to say this, don't be afraid of breaking the cycle. And you might be, what kind of cycle? Well, let's go ahead and let me tell you a little bit about the cycle that I had to break real quick, okay? Now, in my culture, there it's very frowned upon to open up and talk about your feelings or literally go to therapy. Literally, like if you're depressed, you have to get over it. If you have anxiety, it's all on your mind. That's one of the things that is very frowned upon in my culture. And what I had to do, because like I have mentioned before, I dealt with depression and anxiety. My family wasn't supportive, so I never had any good support until I met my wife. She supported me all the way, and because of this, I had to break that cycle. Like, I know that my whole family has anxiety. I know that my whole family suffers from depression. They might deny it, but now that I'm looking at it from the outside, I'm like, yeah, they do, because they're still doing the same things that I used to do. So I'm like, if I'm doing it because I learned it from them and it turned out to be depression or anxiety, then that means that they have it. It means that they have it, but they don't wanna deal with it. They don't wanna literally break that cycle. So I decided to break that cycle. That's why I had to go to therapy. I had to literally talk about my feelings, talk about how growing up impacted me, like all of these things that happened throughout my life. I had to literally break that cycle and also the mindset of poverty, because I grew up very poor, and I never realized it until I started living with my wife. Now she's from the States. I'm from Mexico. I'm used to literally eat whatever it's in the fridge and make sure that it doesn't go to waste. In here, it's completely different. You buy something, and if it starts to go bad, you throw it away. And that's not how I grew up, so I had to break that cycle as well. And I know that it drove my wife crazy multiple times, because I was like getting mad that we had to throw away so much food, when growing up with my mom, we barely threw away any food. Like, literally, like you make it and you eat it all the way till it's like almost moldy. Literally, that's how I grew up. So I had to break that cycle, because that's a poverty mindset where there's not going to be enough. I have to eat it. So there's so many things that you might have to break out of that cycle throughout your life that you might not even know. And when you're a spoonie and a caregiver, it's very important to do this, because sometimes that could be what's holding you back as well. That cycle. Like, if you grew up in a very poor environment where you couldn't afford medications, let's talk about this. When you couldn't afford medications, what's going to happen to you when you become a spoonie? Then you're going to feel like you can't afford your medications. So in this situation, you can be the first person to break out of that cycle, because if you have if you grew up in that kind of environment, now it's affecting you, because you're gonna feel bad for being sick and having to spend all this money on medications, all this money on doctors, all this money on everything that you need so you can get better. Like, I see it with my wife, because she's always telling me, like, I'm sorry that this costs so much. I'm sorry that this is so expensive. I'm sorry that I'm sick and it's costing us so much money. And I say to her, like, don't worry about the money. Worry about getting better. But then once I met her dad, I'm like, that's where it's coming from, because her dad grew up very poor. So what happened? He passed that on to her, kind of like my family passed the depression and the anxiety on to me, and I had to break out of that cycle. Now my wife has to break out of that cycle as well, that her dad started her on. And also there are other cycles that you have to break. Like, for example, for a caregiver, you have to break out that cycle. Like in my case, I had that poor mindset where I was getting frustrated that we had to spend so much money. This was before I was able to tell my wife, like, don't worry about the money. But when we started getting like all the medical bills and everything, I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna hold me back. But it didn't. It was just the way that I grew up. So that was holding me back. That's a cycle that I had to break, and that might be something that you might have to break as well as a caregiver. And another thing is that there's cycles of abuse. So if you're in an abusive situation where a family member like likes to abuse everybody, like emotionally or mentally or physically, and you keep being part of it, then sometimes you're gonna have to break out of that cycle as well. Like, there's so many cycles that you can break out of, and you can be the first person to try it. You can be the first person in your family. And here's one thing though, if you do it, if it's something in regards to your family, when you do it, be prepared to be looked down upon, because your family, it's already used to that cycle. So they might be like, oh, you don't want to be part of the family. No, you just don't want to be part of the bad cycle that is holding you back. That's pretty much what you have to do. Same thing with a caregiver. Like, you're just breaking out of that cycle. You don't have anything against your family. You just want to be having a better life, especially for your spoonie and for yourself, you know? One of the things that this did to me, breaking those cycles, is that it gave me purpose to take care of my wife, because I see the cycles that she has to break out of, and because I was able to break out of mine, now I'm like, you know what? Maybe I can help my wife. And that's why I started the podcast, because it's like, what if I can help somebody, you know? Somebody that can actually understand me when I ramble a lot, and I'm getting better at that. So I might be able to help somebody by telling my story. So that's what's bringing me purpose in life, like helping my wife, helping others, because I've been there. I've been in poverty. I've been through the depression. I've been through the anxiety. I've been through the abuse. I've been through a lot of stuff, and that's why I changed the podcast to what it is right now, because now it gives me the opportunity to open up more about my life, so you guys can understand why I did this. So you might find your purpose, like, for example, to become a better husband, a better father, a better mother, a better wife, a better, like a better coworker, a better friend, something like you once you start working on yourself like this, you're gonna find something that is like, you know what, this is what I needed to be. This is what I always wanted to be. This is what I needed to do. Now, one of the things that you have to understand is that it can help you fight for yourself too. Like, when you break out a cycle, like in my case, this cycle of abuse, this cycle of anxiety, depression, mental health issues, once you start breaking out, once you start fighting back, it feels like you have like a power up, literally. Like you can fight back and be like, you can take control of your life, pretty much. That's how it felt like to me, and that's why I like to do it and talk about it, because I felt like literally this gave me my life back. Fighting back gave me my life back. Even though I was held back for so long, it doesn't matter when you start. It doesn't matter how old you are. Just remember this. Colonel Sanders, the KFC guy, didn't start KFC, or didn't sell his recipe until he was like, what, 55 or 65, something like that. He was over 50. So it doesn't really matter how old you are, because I thought that because of my age it will be harder, and it was it was. But now that I'm actually better working on myself and everything, I'm actually being able to enjoy life until I hit the can, literally. So it doesn't matter how many years I have left. If it gives me 5 good years, then that's all it matters. If it gives you 1 year, 2 years, 2 good years, it's better than the bad years that you have already had, don't you think? So that's why it helps you fight for yourself. And in the end, when you fight for yourself and you work on yourself, you might be able to see the finished product. It gives you vision of the finished product that you want to be. So all you have to do is fight back. And I know it's not easy, it's hard, but it can be done. You just have to fight hard. And if you have somebody that actually supports you, it gets even better, because you don't have to do it alone. And you also it can be what you need to bring income to your family, because one of the things that I realized in my case is that once I started working on myself, I started working harder because I had to take care of my wife. Like, I started working harder. I started working so much better, because my purpose right now is to help my wife get better. So once I started doing that, my income has increased. Literally, I've been able to bonus every month. I've been able to get a bigger paycheck, like things like that. So there's so many things that this can help you with when you break out of whatever cycle you're on. And one of the most important things that you need to do, one of the most important things, let me say it right, is that when you have to realize what cycle you have to break. Because I didn't know I was on a cycle that I kept following the same patterns. Even though I wasn't living with my mom or seeing my family, I was still following the same cycle, and my wife helped me break out of that pretty much. And it was hard. Like I said, it's gonna be always hard, but you can do it. I know you can, because to be honest, if I can do it, so can you. I'm not putting myself down or anything like that. I'm just saying that, like, if I can do it, because if you had known me before, you would have understand that I was so lazy. I was so lazy that I didn't want to go to therapy. There were, like I have mentioned before, I never wanted to go to therapy, but then something happened where I had to. So I had to become strong so I can literally take myself to therapy. I had to break out of that cycle. I had to make sure that I was able to take care of my wife. I had to make sure that I'm able to provide for my wife. So that pushed me. So that's why you have to have a strong wife, which is something that I'm going to be talking about later in the podcast, because that's going to be a whole episode on its own. But this is what I wanted to talk about today. I hope you guys are enjoying the episodes. I hope you guys are liking it. But in order for us to grow, don't forget to share, like, subscribe. Also, if you want to provide a comment, you can always provide a comment. Don't forget to provide your feedback, because thanks to you, the podcast is growing. And if you know somebody that can benefit from the podcast, don't forget to share it to them. Don't forget to invite them to the community. If you want to share your story or ask me questions about what it's like to be a Spoonie or a caregiver, or how I would deal with certain situations, don't forget to send them to me at the Spoonie and Caregiver Life at gmail.com, or you can send me an email. I am on social media. And thanks to you, we're growing. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for the new listeners. Thank you for the new subscribers, the new likes on Facebook. Thank you. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And I leave you like always. As always, take care of yourself and have a great day.